Ethan Carter slammed both hands on that diner counter so hard the coffee cups rattled, and every single person in that room went dead silent. He wasn't a man who raised his voice. Everyone in Millbrook knew that, but what he just saw on Lily Bennett's back, that long, brutal scar running from her shoulder blade down to her spine, made something crack open inside his chest that he hadn't felt since the night he buried his wife. Someone did that to her. On purpose. And the worst part? Nobody in this town had ever bothered to ask why. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this travels. If it moves you, subscribe and ride with me to the very end. The tray hit the floor at 9:47 on a Thursday night. Ethan heard it before he saw it, that sharp, metallic crash that cuts through diner noise like a gunshot. He was sitting in booth 4, the one closest to the window, nursing his second cup of coffee and pretending to look at his phone. He wasn't really looking at his phone. He was doing what he always did after a long shift at the site, sitting somewhere public and quiet, so he didn't have to go home to a house that still felt too big, too empty, too full of the wrong kind of silence. His son Noah was 8 years old and already asleep by now. Mrs. Garfield from next door stayed until 10. Ethan had 40 minutes. He wasn't expecting anything from this night. He never expected anything from any night anymore. The sound of the tray crashing snapped his head up. He saw plates, coffee mugs, somebody's half-eaten slice of pie, all of it scattered across the linoleum floor in one of those slow-motion disasters that happen so fast you can't stop them and can't look away from them. He saw Lily. She was down on one knee, already reaching for the broken pieces, already trying to clean it up before anyone could make it worse. Her face was turned down. Her dark brown hair had fallen forward across her cheek, and she was moving fast. The way people move when they're trying to disappear. And then her uniform shifted. That's all it was. One small shift of fabric. The back of her blue server's shirt pulled slightly to the left as she reached forward. And for just a moment, no more than 2 or 3 seconds, the collar fell away from her right shoulder. The scar was not subtle. It was not small. It ran from the top of her shoulder blade, jagged and wide, disappearing down beneath the line of her uniform, in a way that told you it kept going. It was old, fully healed, but the skin had that particular texture, raised and discolored, and slightly too smooth, in the wrong places that only comes from something serious. Something that had required real time to survive. Ethan had seen injuries on job sites. He'd seen guys get hurt. He knew the difference between an accident scar and what he was looking at right now. This was not an accident scar. He was on his feet before he made the decision to stand up. "Here," he said. "Let me help." He was already crouching down, picking up the larger pieces of the broken mug, setting them carefully on the tray. Lily looked up at him, and the expression on her face was something he recognized, immediately embarrassed, grateful, braced for something worse. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I've got it." "I know you do," Ethan said. "I'm helping anyway." She looked at him for a half second, like she was trying to figure out what the catch was. He didn't say anything else. He just kept picking up the pieces. From across the diner, a man in a business suit made a sound, that particular exhale of impatience that's specifically designed to make service workers feel small. "Can we get some attention over here when you're done with your little project?" Ethan looked up at the man slowly. He didn't say anything. He just looked at him, the way that men over 40 who've buried a wife and raised a child alone sometimes look at men who've never had to carry anything, heavy, long and quiet, and utterly unintimidated. The man in the suit looked away first. Lily noticed. She pressed her lips together, like she was trying not to smile. "Thank you," she said, when the tray was mostly cleared. "You really didn't have to do that." "My mother was a waitress," Ethan said, straightening up. 31 years. "I know what it looks like when somebody's already running on empty and the floor decides to make its move." That pulled a small laugh from her, surprised, genuine, the kind that comes out before you can decide whether to let it. She tucked her hair behind her ear, and for just a moment she looked less like someone bracing for impact and more like herself. "Whatever that was, I'm Lily," she said. "Ethan." She nodded, picked up the tray, and went back to work. He went back to his booth. But he didn't look at his phone again. He came back the next Tuesday. He told himself it was because the coffee was better than the place closer to the job site. That was partially true. But the real reason, the one he didn't examine too closely, was that he'd been thinking about that scar for 4 days, and he couldn't fully explain why. He wasn't the type to involve himself in other people's pain. He had enough of his own. After Claire died, he'd built a life around simplicity and purpose. Get up, take care of Noah, go to work, come home, repeat. He wasn't lonely exactly. He was just focused. That was the word he used. Focused. But that scar had gotten under his skin, in a way he couldn't shake loose. Lily was working the same section. Recognized him. When he walked in, he saw it in the slight change in her posture. The way her chin came up just a degree. Not defense, just aware. Back again, she said, setting down a menu he didn't need. Coffee's good here. Coffee's the same everywhere. The booth's comfortable. They're all the same booths. He looked at her. I like the view. She blinked. Then she realized he was looking past her, out the window at the rain-slicked street outside, and she let out that short, surprised laugh again. What do you want? Coffee, black, and whatever the soup is today. Chicken and wild rice. That works. She wrote it down even though it was clearly not complicated enough to need writing down, and he realized she was one of those servers who writes everything down as a way of maintaining professional distance, keeping the transaction clearly a transaction. He respected that. When she came back with the coffee, he said, You grew up around here? She paused just slightly before setting down the cup. Born here, you? No, moved here about 6 years ago, after my wife passed. She looked at him directly for the first time. Not with pity, he'd had enough of that to last several lifetimes, but with something quieter. Recognition, maybe. I'm sorry, she said. Yeah. He wrapped both hands around the mug. Me too. She stood there for half a second longer than the job required. Then she went to check on table 7. He came back the following Friday, and the one after that. Millbrook was a small enough town that people noticed. Dorothy Hess, who came in every morning for her oatmeal, and had opinions about everything, told her friend Sheila that construction man was developing some kind of fixation. The 2 college kids, who worked the weekend breakfast shift, had already started calling him Lily's regular in the back. Lily herself never mentioned it. She was professional. She was consistent. She remembered his order after the second visit and stopped bringing him a menu. But she also started staying a few minutes longer at his booth than was strictly necessary. Not obvious about it, she always had a reason. The coffee refill. The check, clearing the table next to his. But it was there. On the 6th visit, he asked her about the scar. He hadn't planned to. He'd told himself he wasn't going to. It wasn't his business. People had a right to their own wounds, and their own silence around those wounds. He knew that better than anyone. But she'd spent the last 10 minutes telling him about a regular customer named Mr. Patterson who came in every Tuesday and always left her articles clipped from the newspaper about topics he thought she'd find interesting, usually about cooking or community events or local history, and she'd been smiling the whole time, this warm, unguarded smile that reached her eyes, and he'd looked at her face and thought, this woman is genuinely good. And somebody hurt her. He set down his coffee cup. Lily. She looked at him. Last week, when you dropped the tray, I saw your back. The warmth drained from her face, so fast it was almost physical. She went very still. I'm not asking to be nosy, he said. He kept his voice level, low, the same tone he used when Noah woke up from a nightmare and needed someone to be steadier than the fear. I've been thinking about it. And I want to ask you something. She was already reaching for his cup. The professional autopilot switching on. Let me get you a refill. Who did that to you? She froze. The diner kept moving around them. Somebody's kid was laughing at the counter. The bell above the door rang as someone walked in. The radio in the kitchen was playing something from the 90s, but at booth 4, everything was perfectly still. Lily set the coffee pot down on the table, which she would never normally do. You never set the coffee pot down. That was practically rule 1, and she looked at him with an expression that was one of the most complicated things he had ever seen on a human face. There was fear in it. There was grief. There was something that might have been relief struggling to surface, and not quite making it. Why would you ask me that? Her voice was quiet, steady, controlled. Because I've been coming in here for 3 weeks, Ethan said, And I've watched the way you treat people. The way you remembered that old man's birthday last week and brought him a free slice of pie without making a big deal about it. The way you handled those guys from the construction crew who were being inappropriate and never once let them see that it rattled you. The way you work twice as hard as anyone else in here and smile while you're doing it. He paused. Someone with that much kindness in them doesn't deserve to carry whatever that scar came from alone. She looked at him for a long moment. He didn't look away. It's a long story, she finally said. I'm not in a hurry, I have tables, I'll wait. Another long pause. Outside, a car rolled through a puddle and splashed against the curb. The radio switched to a song about home. I get off at 10, Lily said quietly. Ethan nodded. I'll have another cup of coffee. They sat in that booth until nearly midnight. The dinner rush had long since cleared out. The college kids had wiped down the other tables and retreated to the back. The only other person in the building was Ray, the overnight cook, who was 63 years old and had the rare and valuable gift of minding his own business. Lily sat across from Ethan, with both hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea, and told him things she had not said out loud in years. She'd been 24 years old when it happened. She had a job, a real job, she said, with a little self-deprecating twist to the word real. Like she was still apologizing for having wanted more at a pharmaceutical distribution company over in Hargrove County, 40 minutes away. She'd been there almost 2 years. She was good at it. She was working toward an operations coordinator position. Her direct supervisor was a man named Gerald Marsh. He didn't seem like anything at first, she said. He was just a guy. Kind of forgettable. The kind of person you work with every day, and then 5 years later you struggle to picture their face. Ethan nodded. He was listening the way he'd learned to listen fully, without filling silences, without reaching for the reassuring comment before the other person was done. He started making comments. About my weight. Her voice was flat as she said it, the flatness of someone who's rehearsed the neutrality because the alternative is too costly. Little things at first. That's a lot of food, Lily. Are you sure you should be eating that at your desk? He'd do it in front of people, and then look at them like he expected them to laugh. And sometimes they did, and I reported it once. To a woman named Diane, she wrote something down, and told me she'd look into it. Lily looked at her tea. Gerald got a note in his file. He knew I was the one who reported it. The comments got worse. Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't say anything. I started taking a different route through the building, so I didn't have to pass his office. I started eating lunch in my car. She paused. I was 24. I didn't know what else to do. What happened? She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was still steady, but only barely. There was something underneath it. Something she was holding carefully, like a bowl of water that can't be spilled. There was a storage area on the 3rd floor. Supply closet, basically. But big, the kind where they kept the old equipment and filing boxes. I went up there one afternoon to get a printer cartridge, and he followed me in. Ethan went very still. It wasn't, she stopped. Started again. He grabbed my arm, and he was angry about the HR report. And there was a shelving unit, one of those old metal ones. They never bolted to the wall properly, and when I tried to get away from him, I pulled against him, and the unit came down. She set down the mug. Her hands were steady. He noticed that, and understood it cost her something. Half the unit landed on my back. The shelving corner caught my shoulder. I was on the floor for, she shook her head. I don't know how long. A while. He left you there, Ethan said. It wasn't a question. He left me there. Her voice was perfectly even. And then he went back downstairs and told everyone I'd been up there alone and been careless, and that the shelving had already been reported as unstable, which was a lie, and that it was an OSHA violation that was already being addressed, which was also a lie, and by the time I got out of the hospital 3 days later, the official story was already written. And you were the careless employee who'd had an accident. I was the careless, overweight employee who'd had an accident. She looked at him. He made sure they added that part, that I'd been up there getting snacks from the break room supply, which was, she stopped, took a breath, which was not what I was doing. The restaurant was very quiet. Lily, Ethan said. I lost my job, she said. Workers' compensation covered the medical bills. Eventually, After a lot of forms and arguments. Gerald Marsh got promoted 8 months later. I found that out through someone I still knew there. She picked up her tea again. I've been a waitress since I was 25. I'm 30 now. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Does he still work there? As far as I know. Has anyone else ever come forward? Any other employees? She looked at him. Why? Because men like that don't change. They keep going until someone stops them. Maybe, she said. But it's been 6 years, and I'm a plus-size waitress who got hurt in a supply closet. Ethan, I'm not exactly the kind of story that makes the news. He looked at her for a long moment. There was something building in his chest that he recognized, but hadn't felt in years, not anger exactly. Though it was made partly from anger. It was closer to what he felt on the job site, when something had been done wrong and dangerously, and he was the only one who was going to say so. That scar, he said, is not who you are. She blinked. I know that's probably not a new thing to hear, he said. And I know it doesn't fix anything. But I've been sitting across from you for a month, and I want you to hear me when I say it. That scar is not the most interesting thing about you. Not even close. She looked at him for a long time. Something shifted in her expression, slow, careful, like ice that isn't sure yet whether it's safe to thaw. You're a strange man, Ethan Carter, she said. I've been told. You come in here twice a week and drink mediocre coffee, and you act like you've got nowhere better to be. I don't, he said simply. Not until 10. Then, very quietly, you're the first person who's asked me that question. In 6 years. Which question? Who did this to you? She said it like she was testing the weight of it. Everyone who noticed the scar just. She shook her head. They looked away, or they stared. But nobody ever just asked. Ethan nodded. You deserve to be asked, he said. He got home at 12:23 in the morning. Mrs. Garfield had left a note on the counter saying Noah had asked for him twice before falling asleep, which landed in Ethan's chest with the particular weight of things that can't be fixed retroactively. He checked on his son. The boy was deep asleep, one arm thrown over the edge of the mattress, his mouth slightly open, completely abandoned to unconsciousness, the way only children and people without debt can fully manage. Ethan stood in the doorway for a moment. He thought about Lily sitting in that storage room on the 3rd floor of a building 40 minutes away, 6 years ago, with a metal shelf across her back and nobody coming. He thought about Gerald Marsh, who had been promoted 8 months later. He thought about the way Lily had said, I'm not exactly the kind of story that makes the news, not bitterly. Not with self-pity, just as a plain and practical fact that she had long since accepted. He went to the kitchen. He sat down at the table. He opened his laptop. He told himself he was just going to look up the company. Just to see. Just to understand the full picture. He typed in Marsh. Gerald, Pharmaceutical Distribution. Hargrove County. The results loaded. Ethan leaned forward. And what he found made the coffee cups rattle all over again, except this time. There was no one else in the room to hear it. The name Gerald Marsh appeared 11 times in the first 2 pages of search results, and not one of those results was what Ethan expected to find. He'd expected maybe a LinkedIn profile, a company directory listing, something boring and institutional that would confirm the man existed, had the job Lily described, and had moved on with his life, completely untouched, while she spent 6 years carrying a scar and a secret. That was the story he thought he was about to read. What he actually found was a local business profile from the Hargrove County Chamber of Commerce newsletter, dated 14 months ago, with Gerald Marsh's photograph, a soft-faced man in his mid-50s, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of smile that takes effort to hold, announcing his promotion, to Regional Vice President of Operations at Crestfield Pharmaceutical Distribution. There was a quote from him about leadership and integrity. Ethan read that sentence twice. He sat back in his chair. Then he kept searching. The second thing he found was smaller. A comment thread on a local community forum, the kind of low-traffic civic website that every mid-size county in America has, usually updated about 4 times a year, and mostly used for lost dog announcements and complaints about road construction. The thread was from 3 years back, titled something vague about workplace safety. Buried in the middle of it, between 2 comments about parking lot lighting, was a post from a username that was just a string of letters and numbers. The post read, Does anyone know if there's a way to report a supervisor at a company in Hargrove County without it coming back to you? Asking for someone who got hurt and is scared of retaliation. Nobody had answered it. Ethan stared at that unanswered question for a long time. He thought about whoever had typed it. Young, probably. Scared. Reaching out to a forum nobody reads, hoping someone would throw them a rope, and finding nothing but silence. He closed the laptop. He went to bed. He did not sleep well. Next morning, he made Noah's lunch, drove him to school, and went directly to the job site in Clover Ridge, where his crew was framing out a new residential building. He spent 8 hours doing physical work in cold air, which was normally the thing that cleared his head better than anything else. It didn't work that day. At 4 o'clock, when the crew was packing up, his foreman Dale walked over and said, "You pull something? You've had that look all day." "What look?" "The look like you're lifting something that isn't there." Ethan pulled off his work gloves. "I'm fine." "Sure you are," Dale said, in the tone of a man who's known you long enough to stop arguing about it. Ethan drove to Noah's after-school program, picked up his son, listened to a very detailed account of a disagreement at recess that had apparently involved a kickball, a disputed boundary line, and a betrayal of historic proportions. He made dinner. He helped with homework. He read 2 chapters of a book about a boy who discovers his dog can talk, which Noah had been requesting every night for a week. And then at 9 o'clock, after Noah was asleep and the house was quiet, he opened the laptop again. This time he wasn't just looking. He was looking for something specific. He typed, "Crestfield Pharmaceutical, Distribution, Hargrove County Employee Complaints." He typed, "Gerald Marsh Harassment Complaint." He typed, "Workplace Injury, 3rd Floor Supply Area, Hargrove County Pharmaceutical, 2018-2019. The third search pulled up something. It was a public OSHA inspection record, dated 19 months after Lily's accident. Not at Crestfield, at a different facility, a warehouse out in Branford, 30 miles east. But the inspector's notes referenced a prior incident at a related facility in Hargrove County, flagged as an example of inadequate equipment maintenance protocol. The note was bureaucratic and dry and didn't name anyone, but it named the facility, Crestfield Pharmaceutical Distribution, 3rd Floor Supply Area, 2019. Ethan read the note 4 times. Then he picked up his phone and called his brother-in-law. Marcus Webb had been Claire's brother, which meant that after Claire died, Ethan had expected the relationship to quietly dissolve the way a lot of in-law relationships do when the person who connected them is gone. But Marcus had shown up at the house 3 weeks after the funeral with 2 bags of groceries and 0 explanation, and had been showing up more or less regularly ever since. He was a corporate attorney in the city, 51 years old, with the particular kind of methodical patience that makes for a good lawyer, and sometimes a frustrating person to talk to at normal speed. The phone rang 4 times. Marcus picked up sounding like he was eating dinner. "Ethan, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. You're calling me at 9:15 on a Tuesday. Something's wrong. I need to ask you something about OSHA records and workers' compensation claims, and whether there's a way to pull employment complaint history on a specific individual at a private company." A pause. The sound of a fork being set down. "Who is this person?" "Someone who hurt someone I know." Another pause. Longer this time. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had shifted into the register Ethan privately thought of as lawyer mode: careful, precise, not unkind but no longer casual. "Tell me what you have." Ethan told him. All of it: Lily, the scar, the story she'd told him in the diner booth, the OSHA record he'd found, the unanswered forum post from 3 years back, Gerald Marsh's promotion, the timeline. Marcus was quiet for almost 30 seconds after Ethan finished. "The OSHA record is interesting," he said finally. "If it references the Hargrove facility by name, that's a documented acknowledgement of a prior incident. That matters. Can it be used for anything? Depends on what you mean by used. If the woman Lily, if she wanted to pursue a civil claim, the statute of limitations on personal injury in this state is 3 years from the date of injury, which means that window has closed." But he paused. "That's not the only window. What do you mean?" If there's a pattern of conduct, if Marsh did something to other employees before or after Lily, then you're potentially looking at a hostile work environment claim, which has a different timeline, or a negligent retention argument against the company itself. And those claims are not time-barred in the same way. Ethan was quiet. So I need to find other people. I'm not telling you to do anything, Marcus said immediately, in the tone of a man who's spent 30 years being careful about exactly what he tells people to do. I'm telling you the legal landscape. What you do with that is your business, Marcus. Yeah. The shelving unit that fell on her, is there any way to find out whether it was actually flagged as a maintenance issue before her accident, the way Marsh claimed it was? Marcus exhaled slowly. Maintenance logs and incident reports are company property. You'd need a subpoena or a cooperative inside source to access them. What if someone still worked there? Then that person would need to make their own choices about what they share, and with whom. A pause. Ethan, I want to ask you something. Go ahead. How well do you know this woman? Ethan thought about Lily sitting in that booth past midnight, with both hands wrapped around a tea mug, telling him the story with that terrifying steadiness, that practiced calm. He thought about the way she'd said, I'm not exactly the kind of story that makes the news, not as a complaint, just as a statement of fact she'd long since accepted. Well enough, he said. Does she know you're doing this? Not yet. Marcus was quiet again. Then, be careful how you handle that part. People who've been through what you're describing, they don't always want to be rescued. Sometimes being rescued looks exactly like being taken over. Make sure she's with you on this before you go any further. I know that. I know you know it, Marcus said. I'm saying it anyway. After he hung up, Ethan sat at the kitchen table for a long time without moving. The house made its small nighttime sounds, the refrigerator cycling, the wind against the window above the sink, the distant sound of a dog somewhere down the street. He thought about what Marcus had said. He thought about what Marcus' face in that moment when she'd told him nobody had ever asked her the question before. He was not going to run this for her. That wasn't what this was. But he was going to find out what there was to find. And then he was going to give her a choice. He went to bed at 11:30. He set his alarm for 5:15. He slept 4 hours and 45 minutes. In the morning, on his way to the job site, he stopped at the diner. Lily wasn't working the morning shift. He knew that from the schedule posted on the wall. He'd noticed it, the way he noticed things without intending to. The same low-level situational awareness that had kept him safe on construction sites for 15 years. She worked Tuesday and Thursday evenings, Saturday mornings, and Sunday afternoons. It was Wednesday. He didn't stay for coffee. He just came in, nodded at the morning server, a young woman named Becca, who had no idea what to make of him, and left a folded note under the corner of the sugar dispenser on booth 4 with Lily's name on the outside. The note said, I found something. Take your time deciding if you want to hear it. He walked back to his truck. He drove to the job site. He framed walls for 8 hours. Lily called him at 6:17 that evening. He was in the driveway, Noah's backpack still over one shoulder, key in his hand. What did you find? Her voice was careful. Not frightened. Careful. There was a difference. How much time do you have right now? I'm between shifts. I've got an hour. Are you somewhere you can talk? I'm sitting in my car in the parking lot behind the diner. Okay. He shifted the backpack, unlocked the front door, let Noah run inside. I found an OSHA inspection record. Hargrove County. It mentions the facility where you worked. The third-floor supply area. By name. Silence. Lily, I'm here. A pause. What does it say? It flags inadequate equipment maintenance. It references a prior incident at the facility as a pattern example. It was written 19 months after your accident. Another silence. When she spoke, her voice was controlled, but something had shifted underneath it. Something tightly wound that had just lost one click of tension. They documented it. Someone did. Not about you specifically, but about the location, about the equipment. Gerald said those shelves had already been reported. He said it was a known hazard that was being addressed. Her voice thinned slightly on those words. That's what went in the official report. That's why my workers' comp claim was so complicated, because the company's position was that it was a known issue and I had been reckless going into that area. But if the OSHA record is from 19 months after your accident, referencing it as a pattern failure, that means the issue hadn't been addressed. Which means his story was a lie. She said it quietly, flatly, like something settling into place that she had always known but hadn't been able to prove. Lily, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Okay. Are there other people from that company? Anyone who saw anything, knew anything, experienced anything similar with Marsh? A long pause, long enough that he thought for a moment she wasn't going to answer. There was a woman, she finally said. Her name was Renee. She worked in accounts payable. She pulled me aside about 2 weeks after I reported Marsh the first time and told me to be careful. That he'd had issues with other women before me, that one of them had left the company suddenly, and nobody knew exactly why. She stopped. I never followed up with her. After the accident, I was trying to survive. Medically, financially. I wasn't in a position to go looking for witnesses. Do you know her last name? Renee Caldwell. A beat. Or it was, 6 years ago. I have no idea where she is now. Ethan pulled out his notepad. He wrote the name down. Okay. Ethan. Her voice shifted. Something harder in it. Not defensive, but real. What exactly are you doing? I'm trying to understand the full picture. Why? He thought about how to answer that. He could say the obvious thing, because it's wrong. Because Marsh shouldn't have gotten away with it. Because justice matters. All of that was true. But it wasn't the full answer. And she deserved the full answer. Because you sat across from me in that booth and told me a story, he said. And the story wasn't finished. Gerald Marsh wrote an ending to it that wasn't true. And you've been living inside that ending for 6 years. I think you deserve to know what the real ending looks like. Even if you decide you don't want to do anything with it. She was quiet for a long time. I don't want you to get hurt, she said finally. That wasn't what he'd expected. I can take care of myself. That's not what I mean. Her voice was careful. People like Gerald Marsh, they have resources. They have lawyers. They have the company behind them. They have the version of events that's already been written and filed and stamped and accepted. And you're a construction worker with a kid and a search engine. And I'm a waitress with a scar and a 6-year-old workers' comp settlement. A pause. I don't want to watch someone else get burned trying to stand next to me. Ethan was quiet for a moment. I appreciate that, he said. I want you to know I heard it. But I need you to hear something too. He chose his words carefully. I'm not doing this because I feel sorry for you. I'm not doing this because I need to fix something. I'm doing this because you told me the truth, and the truth was wrong. And I happen to know someone who knows the law. A beat. And because I'm stubborn. She made a small sound that wasn't quite a laugh, but was in the same neighborhood. My brother-in-law is an attorney, Ethan said. I called him last night. He's not promising anything. But he says there may be angles here that aren't blocked by the statute of limitations on your specific claim. If there's a pattern, if Renee Caldwell or anyone else experienced something similar that changes the legal landscape. Another long silence. I want to be clear about something, Lily said. Tell me, I'm not doing this for revenge. I want you to understand that. I don't want Gerald Marsh to suffer. I don't want she stopped. I want what happened to be true. Officially. I want there to be a record somewhere that says what actually happened. Because for 6 years the only record that exists says I was a careless employee who had an accident. Her voice cracked on the last word. Just barely. That's what the documentation says. Careless. She inhaled. I wasn't careless. I was trying to get away from him. I know, Ethan said. Do you? Not challenging. Genuinely asking. Because saying it and knowing it are different things. And I've been told by a lot of people that they believed me. And then watched them choose the version of the story that was easier. He held the phone tighter. I know, he said again. I believe you, and I'm not going anywhere. He heard her exhale slowly. A bus passed somewhere behind her. He could hear the low rumble through the phone. Renee Caldwell moved to Asheville, Lily said. She posted something on Facebook about 2 years ago about a plant sale at a market there. That's the last I saw of her. Ethan wrote that down too. Don't contact her yet, he said. Let me talk to Marcus first. I want to know what the right approach is before anyone reaches out to anyone. Okay. And Lily. Yeah? This is your story. Every step. If at any point you say stop, we stop. I need you to believe that. A pause. Then quietly, I believe you. She had to get back to her shift. He went inside and helped Noah finish a social studies worksheet about state capitals, which turned into a 20-minute conversation about why states had capitals and why the capital wasn't always the biggest city, and Noah's theory that the whole system should be reconsidered. Ethan made dinner, cleaned up, got Noah to bed, and sat back down at the kitchen table. He found a Facebook profile for Renee Caldwell, Asheville, North Carolina, a woman in her early 40s, brown hair with some gray starting. Her profile was mostly public plant photos, occasional recipes, a few posts about a community garden she was apparently involved with. Nothing about Crestfield, nothing about Gerald Marsh, nothing about Hargrove County. He did not contact her. He made a note of the profile link. Then he found something he wasn't looking for. It was a comment Renee Caldwell had left on a mutual friend's post 8 months ago. The post was about workplace rights, and someone in the comments had made a dismissive remark about why employees don't just report problems when they happen. And Renee had replied in a comment that was publicly visible with 2 sentences that stopped Ethan cold. She'd written, "Because reporting doesn't always mean anything changes. Some of us reported and watched the person who hurt us get promoted while we were still signing papers and trying to explain to people why we left a job we loved." Ethan read those sentences 4 times. Then he went and stood in the hallway outside Noah's door for a minute, just listening to his son breathe. He came back to the table. He opened a new document. He started writing down everything he knew: dates, names, sources, gap, questions. He organized it the way he organized job sites, the way he'd learned to manage complex builds where everything connects and one wrong sequence throws off the whole structure. He worked for 2 hours. At 1 in the morning, he sat back and looked at what he had. It wasn't proof. Not yet. Not close. But it was the skeleton of something, the outline of a pattern, the shape of a truth that had been buried under 6 years of institutional convenience and one man's willingness to let someone else take the damage. He thought about Lily in that storage room. He thought about her saying, "I wasn't careless. I was trying to get away from him." He thought about Gerald Marsh, who had been promoted 8 months later and who was now a regional vice president of operations at, they quote about leadership and integrity in the Chamber of Commerce newsletter. He thought about Renee Caldwell in Asheville, growing plants, leaving 2 sentences on a stranger's Facebook post because some things never fully leave you, no matter how far away you move. He picked up his phone. He texted Marcus a summary. He attached the document. He added at the bottom, "When you have time. No rush." Marcus replied at 7 the next morning, which for a 51-year-old corporate attorney might as well have been the middle of the night. The text said, "This is more than I expected. Call me when you can. Some of this is actually usable." Ethan was already at the job site when he read it. He was standing in the frame of what would eventually be a living room. Morning cold, coming through where the windows hadn't been installed yet. A cup of gas station coffee in one hand and his phone in the other. He read the text again. "This is more than I expected. Some of this is actually usable." He put the phone in his pocket. He picked up his nail gun. Dale called something across the frame about the header beam on the east wall, and Ethan called back that he'd seen it and it needed to be recut. And he went back to work steady, methodical, one nail at a time, building something that would still be standing in 20 years. At noon, he texted Lily. Marcus says the OSHA record and the timing of Marsh's promotion, together with a potential second witness, creates a possible pattern argument. He wants to talk to you. No pressure. When you're ready. She didn't respond until 4:15. "I'm not ready yet." He replied. "That's fine," she replied. 3 minutes later. "But I think I need to be." He sat with that for a moment. Then he typed, "Take until Saturday. Meet me at the diner. You can decide then." A pause. Then okay. He put his phone away and went back to framing. The east wall went up clean. The header beam fit right. By the end of the day, the structure was taking shape solid. Square plumb, the way it was supposed to be. That night, Ethan sat with Noah at the kitchen table, and they ate spaghetti, and Noah told him about a library book he wanted to get, and Ethan said yes without even asking what it was about, and because that was the kind of father he was trying to be, the kind who says yes before he says wait, the kind who takes the time. He looked at his son's face across the table. All that unguarded openness, all that trust. He thought about what Lily had said. I don't want to watch someone else get burned, trying to stand next to me. He thought, that's exactly the kind of thing someone says when they've been standing alone for so long that asking for help feels like putting someone in danger. He thought, that's exactly the kind of thing that's going to change. Saturday morning came cold and clear. Ethan dropped Noah at Marcus's house. Noah loved Marcus, who had strong opinions about board games and kept a stash of excellent snacks, and drove to the diner. Lily was already there. Not in uniform. She was at booth 4 in jeans and a burgundy sweater, her hair down, her hands flat on the table in front of her. She looked like someone who had spent a week building up to this moment, and wasn't entirely sure her legs would hold. He sat down across from her. She looked at him. I found Renee Caldwell, he said. Lily's eyes went very still. You did. I didn't contact her. But she left a public comment online 8 months ago that suggests she's still carrying what happened at Crestfield. He slid a folded paper across the table. That's what she wrote. Lily looked at the paper for a long time. She picked it up. She read it. He watched something move across her face. Something he didn't have a clean name for. The complicated emotion that sits exactly between relief and grief. The feeling of finding out that you weren't as alone as you believed. She knows, Lily said quietly. Yeah. She set the paper down. She pressed both palms flat against the table. She breathed out slow, deliberate. Tell me what Marcus, she said. All of it, Ethan told her. The statute of limitations, the pattern argument, the OSHA record's potential utility. Renee Caldwell as a corroborating witness if she was willing. The question of maintenance logs and how they might be accessed. He laid it out the way Marcus had laid it out for him, methodically, without overclaiming, without minimizing. Lily listened to all of it without interrupting. When he was done, she was quiet for a long moment. What are the chances, she asked. He didn't soften it. Marcus says uncertain. The time gap is a problem. The company will fight it. Gerald Marsh has 6 years of built-up institutional cover. He held her gaze. But the OSHA record is real. And if Renee talks, the pattern is real. And a real pattern is something a good lawyer can work with. Does Marcus know a good lawyer? Marcus is a good lawyer. She blinked. I can't afford. He's not asking for anything. He's Claire's brother. He's doing this because I asked, and because he's been looking for something to do with himself since his kids went to college. He paused. Also, I think once I told him the story he wanted to. Lily looked at him. Why are you doing this, Ethan? And I don't mean the practical answer. I mean the real one. He thought about it honestly. Because 6 years ago, you were in a room with someone who had all the power. And you had none, and the room broke the wrong way. And everyone who could have helped you decided not to. He paused. I'm not everyone. She looked at him for a long time. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes were bright. Okay, she finally said. Okay, what? Okay, I'll talk to Marcus. She pulled in a breath. And okay, if Renee is willing, we'll see what the truth actually looks like when you put it somewhere official. Ethan nodded. But Ethan, yeah, if this goes sideways, if it doesn't work, if Gerald Marsh has better lawyers and better documentation, and it all falls apart. She looked at him steadily. I need to be okay on the other side of it. I need to know that trying didn't just break something that was barely holding together. It won't, he said. Because here's what I know about you that you apparently don't know about yourself yet. He leaned forward slightly. You've been holding this together alone for 6 years. That means you're already stronger than whatever this process throws at you. He held her gaze. I'm just going to be standing next to you while you figure that out. She was quiet for a very long moment. You're going to make me cry in this diner, she said finally, in a voice that was almost steady. That's fine, he said. I'll get you a coffee. I work here, I know. I'll still get you a coffee. She laughed. It was a real one, full, surprised. The kind that comes up from somewhere deep before you can decide whether to let it. A couple at the counter turned to look, and Lily pressed her fingers to her mouth for a second, still laughing. And for just that moment she looked exactly like the person she'd been before. A metal shelf and a coward's lie had tried to bury her. Ethan watched her and thought, there she is. That's who she is. That's who she's been all along. The coffee came. They sat in booth 4 for another hour and talked not about Gerald Marsh, not about OSHA records or statutes of limitations or legal strategy, but about Noah's library book and the community garden in Asheville and a customer at the Teener who'd been coming in for 30 years and still couldn't decide between the two kinds of pie and so ordered both every single time. Simple things. Real things. The kind of things that remind you that life is actually built from not from the moments that break you, but from every small ordinary moment you choose to keep showing up for. When Lily finally stood to go back behind the counter, she paused next to his booth. Saturday afternoon, she said. Would it be okay if I met Marcus then? I'll set it up. She nodded, started to walk away. Stopped Ethan. He looked up. Thank you. She said it simply. Not heavily, not dramatically. Just the clean weight of 2 words that meant exactly what they said. He nodded. She went back to work. He sat with his coffee for a few minutes longer, alone in booth 4. Watching the morning move through the diner, the regulars coming and going. The small transactions of an ordinary day, Lily moving between tables with that particular grace of someone who has learned to carry a lot without letting it show. He thought about the forum post from 3 years ago. The one that said, does anyone know if there's a way to report a supervisor without it coming back to you? Asking for someone who got hurt and is scared of retaliation. Nobody had answered it. He was going to make sure that someone answered it now. Marcus Webb's home office smelled like old books and fresh coffee, which was the exact combination that made Ethan feel like whatever happened next had at least a reasonable chance of going somewhere useful. Marcus had cleared the table by the window, pushed aside the stacks of case files and the half-finished crossword puzzle he kept, claiming he was going to finish someday, and set out 3 mugs and a legal pad and a pen that looked expensive enough to mean business. Lily sat across from Marcus with her hands folded in her lap and her chin up, and Ethan recognized the posture immediately. It was the same one she used in the diner when a difficult customer walked in controlled, ready, giving nothing away before she had to. Marcus had reviewed everything Ethan sent him. He'd printed the OSHA record. He'd looked up Renee Caldwell. He'd cross-referenced the workers' compensation filing dates with the OSHA inspection timeline. He'd done all of this without being asked and without billing anyone, which told Ethan more about his brother-in-law's feelings on the situation than any amount of professional language could. Marcus set down his coffee and looked at Lily directly. I want to start by saying something that isn't legal advice. Lily waited. What happened to you was wrong, Marcus said. Not complicated wrong. Not he said she said wrong. Straightforwardly, documentably, indefensibly wrong. I want you to hear that before we talk about anything else. Something crossed Lily's face fast, unguarded, gone before she could control it. She looked down at her hands for a second. Looked back up. Thank you, she said quietly. Okay, Marcus said. Now here's what we actually have. He walked her through it. The way Ethan had come to appreciate about Marcus: no overselling, no false confidence, no softening the hard parts to make them easier to swallow. The OSHA record was real and useful. The timing of Marsh's promotion relative to Lily's accident created a paper trail that a good attorney could frame as institutional indifference, at minimum. The personal injury statute had run, but if Renee Caldwell had experienced something documentably similar, the hostile work environment angle had a different legal clock. The maintenance log question was still open. That was the piece Marcus said mattered most. If those logs show that shelving unit was not flagged as a hazard before your accident, Marcus said, then the official story the company built is demonstrably false. And if it's demonstrably false, everything built on top of it, your termination paperwork, the workers' comp settlement characterization, Marsh's version of events becomes challengeable. Lily was quiet for a moment. How do we get the maintenance logs? We ask someone who still has access. The room went still. Lily looked at the table. I don't know who's still there. It's been 6 years, one person, Ethan said. Both of them looked at him. The comment Renee left, she said she reported it. Present tense framing, even talking about the past. Which means she kept track. He looked at Marcus. She might still know people inside Crestfield. People who've been there long enough to know where those logs live. Marcus tapped the legal pad with his pen. That's a reach. Everything here is a reach, Ethan said. But it's the right direction. Lily had been listening to both of them with that same controlled stillness. Now she said quietly, I'll talk to Renee. Ethan looked at her. You sure? She wrote 2 sentences on a stranger's post that sounded exactly like something I would write if I thought nobody was listening. Lily's voice was steady. I think she's been waiting for someone to call. Marcus nodded slowly. If she's willing to make a statement, even informal, even just in writing, combined with the OSH record and the timeline, that gives me something real to bring to an employment attorney I know in the city. She handles pattern cases. She's won some. Would Lily need to pay contingency? Marcus said. If she takes the case, she works on contingency. No money up front. Lily's expression shifted slightly. The particular relief of someone who needed that answer and was afraid to ask for it. Okay, she said. Give me Renee's information. I'll reach out this week. Marcus slid a piece of paper across the table. It had Renee Caldwell's name, the Facebook profile link, and an Asheville phone number Marcus had tracked down through a public records search. Lily looked at it for a long moment, picked it up, folded it carefully, and put it in her coat pocket. One more thing, Marcus said. Lily looked at him. Gerald Marsh was promoted 14 months ago. That means he's been in his current position for just over a year. In that year, there are almost certainly new employees working under him. He paused. Sometimes people don't come forward because they think they're alone. If this starts moving, if an attorney gets involved, if a formal complaint gets filed, other people sometimes find their voice. Lily looked at him for a long moment. You mean there might be others? I mean there almost certainly are, Marcus said. Men like this don't suddenly stop. The weight of that settled over the room like something physical. Ethan watched Lily absorb it, watched her work through the math of what it meant. That for every year she had stayed silent, there had been more women sitting in supply rooms and break rooms and cars in parking lots, trying to figure out how to explain something that everyone around them preferred not to see. Her jaw tightened. Then let's move fast. Marcus uncapped his pen. Tell me everything from the beginning. I want it all on paper. In your words, in order. We start today. They were there for 3.5 hours. Ethan mostly listened. He refilled the coffee. He handed Lily a box of tissues when she hit the part about the hospital, which she took without comment and used exactly once, and then set on the table with the precision of someone who was allowing themselves exactly that much. Marcus wrote everything down in his careful attorney's hand, asking clarifying questions in that quiet, steady voice that made the hardest things feel survivable to say out loud. By the time they were done, the legal pad was full. Marcus's pen had run dry, and he'd switched to a second one. Lily sat back in her chair and looked like someone who had just run a very long distance, exhausted. Yes, but the kind of exhausted that comes from finally moving rather than from staying still. How do you feel? Marcus asked her. She thought about it honestly. Like I put something down that I've been carrying for a long time. A pause. And a little bit like I'm terrified about what happens next. That's exactly the right feeling, Marcus said. Means you understand what this is. Ethan drove Lily back to her apartment. She was quiet for most of the drive, which he didn't try to fill. He'd learned already that her silences weren't absence. They were the sound of someone thinking carefully. When he pulled up in front of her building, she didn't get out right away. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Does Noah know about any of this? The question surprised him slightly. No, he's 8. What does he know about? I mean, does he know you've been coming to the diner? That we've been talking? Ethan considered. He knows I've been going to a diner. He knows I have a friend. He hasn't asked more than that. Lily was quiet for a second. What would you tell him if he asked? That I met someone who needed a hand, and I happened to have one free. He glanced at her. Why? She looked out the window. Because I've been thinking whatever happens with Marsh, with the case, with all of it, that's one part of my life. But there's this other part that I let go dark a long time ago. Friends. People who actually know me. A life that exists outside of that diner. She paused. I forgot I was allowed to have that. You didn't forget, Ethan said. Someone told you, over and over, without words, that you didn't deserve it. There's a difference. She turned and looked at him. You're very sure about things, she said. Not usually, he said honestly. But about this one, yeah. She almost smiled. Opened the door. Paused on the way out. Tell Noah I said hi. Even if he doesn't know who I am yet. I will, Ethan said. Get some sleep, Lily. She went inside. He drove home. The night felt different than it had 2 weeks ago, not lighter exactly, but more like the beginning of something real, rather than the inside of something, stuck. Tuesday came. Lily texted at 8:43 in the morning. I called Renee. Ethan was on a roof, with a nail gun, and he nearly dropped it. He texted back one-handed, and 3 minutes. 4. He went back to work. His phone buzzed. She picked up on the second ring. She knew who I was before I finished saying my name. She said she's been thinking about calling me for 2 years. Ethan set down the nail gun. Dale raised an eyebrow from across the roofline. Ethan waved him off. He typed, "Is she willing to talk to Marcus?" The answer came back in under a minute. "She's willing to do more than that. She kept records, Ethan. She kept everything." He stared at his phone. He read the text again. She kept records. He sat down on the roof, which he never did in the middle of a shift, and just sat there for a moment with the cold air coming off the fields to the east, and the sound of his working below him, and the particular dizzy feeling of a story that has been heading somewhere, finally arriving. He called Marcus from his truck at noon. Renee Caldwell kept records, he said, before Marcus could say hello. Silence. Then, define records. She documented every incident she witnessed, heard about, or personally experienced involving Marsh. Dates, names, locations. She started doing it 6 months into her time at Crestfield, because she said something felt wrong, and she wanted a record in case she ever needed one. Ethan pulled up the notes he'd taken during his call with Lily. She has 43 entries. Over 2 years. Some of them involve Lily. Some of them involve 3 other women she names, by first name. Marcus exhaled slowly. Ethan. I know. 43 documented incidents. Lily is going to ask Renee to share them with you directly. Renee said she wanted to talk to a lawyer before she handed anything over, which is smart. But she's not saying no. Another long pause. I'm going to call Janet Reyes today. She's the employment attorney I mentioned. If she sees this, she'll take it. What's the next step if she does? A formal complaint to the EEOC. Potentially a civil suit, naming Marsh and Crestfield both. With 4 women documented, this isn't a he said she said case anymore. Marcus's voice had that focused quality it got when he was building something in his head. This is a pattern. Ethan thought of Lily in that storage room. He thought of Renee Caldwell in Asheville, growing plants, leaving 2 sentences on a stranger's Facebook post because some things never leave you. He thought of 3 other women whose names were in Renee's records, women he didn't know yet, whose stories had been sitting in a notebook for years, waiting for someone to care enough to read them. Move fast, Ethan said. I will, Marcus said. Tell both of them that they're doing the right thing. He hung up. He ate half a sandwich. He went back to the roof. That evening, he picked up Noah from school, and they went to the diner for dinner, because Noah had been asking for weeks, and Ethan had been saying soon. They sat in booth 4. Becca took their order. Lily was working the far section, but when she passed by she stopped, just for a moment. Hey, she said. Hey, Ethan said. She looked at Noah. Noah looked back at her with the frank, evaluating gaze of an 8-year-old who has not yet learned the social convention of pretending not to stare. You're my dad's friend, Noah said. I am, Lily said. He talks about you. Lily glanced at Ethan. Ethan said nothing, which was probably its own kind of answer. Does he, Lily said. He says you're kind, Noah said, with the bluntness of a child reporting a fact. He says you notice things. Lily's expression did something complicated. She looked at Ethan again, and there was something in her face he hadn't seen before, something open and a little overwhelmed. He said that, she said yeah. Noah looked back at his menu. The interrogation apparently complete. Can I get the grilled cheese? Best in town, Lily said. Her voice was slightly unsteady. She went back to her section. Noah ate his grilled cheese. Ethan drank his coffee. The diner moved around them in its ordinary evening rhythm, and everything felt, for that hour, uncomplicated and good. On the drive home, Noah said, "I like her." "Yeah," Ethan said. "Me too. Is she sad about something?" Ethan looked at the road. "What makes you ask that?" "Because she smiles with her face, but not always with her eyes. Like how you used to be." Noah said it simply, the way children say things that take adults years to articulate. "You're different now." Ethan didn't answer right away. He thought about what to say, and how much of it was true, and how much of it was his to say. "Some people carry hard things for a long time," he finally said. "And then sometimes they find the people who help them put the heavy stuff down for a while." Noah thought about this. "Like when I help you carry the groceries." Ethan smiled. "Exactly like that." Noah seemed satisfied with this, and moved on to the topic of a documentary about deep-sea creatures he wanted to watch before bed, and Ethan let the conversation go where his son needed it to go. But later, standing in the hallway after Noah was asleep, Ethan thought about what his son had said. "You're different now." He hadn't noticed it himself, which meant it was the kind of change that happens from the inside out, slow and real. The kind that doesn't announce itself, just shows up one day, in the way you carry yourself. Thursday night, Marcus called at 7:15. Janet Reyes reviewed the OSHA record and the preliminary summary of Renee's documentation, he said. She wants to meet with both Lily and Renee. She's considering taking the case. Ethan sat down at the kitchen table. "When?" "She can do a video call next week if Lily's available. Renee's in Asheville, but she said she'll drive up if needed." "What's Janet's read on the strength of it?" She said, and I'm quoting, "I've built cases on less than this and won." She also said that the combination of the OSHA record, the documented timeline of Marcia's promotion, and 43 incident entries across 2 years is what she called a compelling foundation. Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Does Lily know yet?" "I wanted to tell you first. You're closer to her day to day." He called Lily as soon as he hung up. She answered on the first ring, which told him she'd been waiting. "Marcus talked to the attorney," he said. He heard her breath catch. "And she wants to meet you and Renee next week. She said the case has a compelling foundation." Silence. Long enough that he said her name. "I'm here," she said. Her voice was very quiet. I don't know what I was expecting. After 6 years of nothing, I think part of me stopped believing there was another version of this." "There is," Ethan said. "There's a version where someone with 43 documented incidents and an OSHA record and a Hill attorney walks into a room and tells the truth, and the truth is enough." She was quiet again. He let the silence sit. "What if Crestfield fights back hard?" she said. "What if they bring in their lawyers and make Renee look unstable and make me look like the bitter, overweight ex-employee who—" "Lily, I'm being realistic. You're catastrophizing," he said, gently but directly. "There's a difference, and yes, they will fight. Janet knows that. Marcus knows that. You know that. But fighting back doesn't mean winning. It means they're scared." Another pause. "You have Renee," he said. "You have 43 entries. You have the OSHA record. You have the timeline. You have the fact that Gerald Marsh was promoted 8 months after putting you in the hospital and leaving you on the floor." He kept his voice steady. "That's not a weak case. That's a case that someone finally chose to build." She inhaled slowly. "Okay, yeah? Yes. Set up the meeting. I'll be there." The meeting was set for the following Wednesday. Video call, 6 o'clock. Lily came to Ethan's house because the connection was better there, and because she said she didn't want to do this alone, and he'd told her she didn't have to. Marcus called in from his office. Renee Caldwell appeared on the screen from what looked like a kitchen in Asheville. She was a woman in her early 40s with gray threading through her brown hair, and the kind of tired but solid expression that comes from having carried something heavy for a long time and refused to let it crush you. When Lily and Renee saw each other on the screen, neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Renee said, "I've thought about calling you for so long." Lily pressed her lips together. "I know, me too." And then Janet Reyes joined the call, and everything changed again. Janet was 53, Latina, sharp-eyed, and wasted exactly no time. She'd reviewed everything Marcus had sent. She went through her questions with the controlled efficiency of someone who had sat across from corporate attorneys in depositions and won. She asked Lily about the incident. She asked Renee about her documentation process. She asked about other women, whether either of them knew their full last names, had any contact information, had any reason to believe they might be willing to come forward. Renee said, "Two of them, I know where they are. One of them still lives in Hargrove County." Janet made a note. "I'll want to reach out to them. Through you first, so it doesn't feel cold." Renee nodded. "I'll do it." "Before I can formally take this case," Janet said, "I need signed statements from both of you. I need Renee's documentation transferred to me under attorney-client privilege. And I need you both to understand that this will take time. It will not be clean. Crestfield will hire people who are very good at making plaintiffs feel like the problem. I want you to be prepared for that." Lily said, "How prepared do I need to be?" Janet looked at her directly. "As prepared as someone who knows the truth and can hold on to it even when the other side is working very hard to make her doubt it." Lily held her gaze. "I've been holding on to it for 6 years. I think I can manage." Something shifted in Janet's expression, not quite a smile, but close. "Good," she said. "Then let's get to work." After the call ended, Ethan and Lily sat in his kitchen for a while without talking. Noah had gone to bed. The house was quiet. The legal pad Marcus had started 6 days ago was now part of a formal case file being built by a woman who had won cases like this before. "How are you?" Ethan asked. "Scared," Lily said, then, "Ready." "Both of those are true at the same time, I know." She looked at her hands. "When I left Crestfield, when I lost that job, when I was still in physical therapy, when I was starting at the diner, I told myself that the best outcome was just getting through it. Surviving. Moving forward. Not looking back." She paused. "I didn't think there was another option." "There wasn't," Ethan said. "Not then. You didn't have what you have now." "What do I have now?" He thought about it honestly. "Renee. The records. Janet. Marcus." A pause. "And the fact that you didn't let 6 years make you into someone who stopped believing the truth mattered." She looked at him. Her eyes were bright. "And you?" she said quietly. He held her gaze. "Yeah, and me." She looked away first, but not in the way people look away from things that are too much, more like someone who needs a second to something real. Outside, a car drove by. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere upstairs, Noah shifted in his sleep. "I need to ask you something," Lily said. "Go ahead. When this is over, however it ends, what do you want?" He thought about the question. The real answer, not the practical one. "I want you to be able to walk into that diner and know that the truth about what happened to you exists somewhere in the official record. That it's not just a story you tell in diner booths after midnight." She was quiet. "And after that," she said. He looked at her. "After that, I'd like to take you and Noah to that awful chain pizza place he keeps asking about and let him order the maximum number of toppings and watch you both argue about which ones are good." She laughed. It was the real one, the full one, the one that reached her eyes and stayed there. "That's your answer?" she said. "That's the beginning of my answer," he said. She held his gaze for a moment. "Okay," she said. She stood to go. He walked her to the door. She paused on the threshold, coat in hand, the cold air coming in around her, and looked at him with an expression that was neither gratitude nor something more than that, but the particular place between those two things where real things live. "Ethan, yeah. Nobody's ever stood next to me like this." She said it plainly, without drama. "I don't know what I did to deserve it." He shook his head. "That's not how it works," he said. "You didn't have to do anything. You just had to be worth it." He held her gaze. "And you are." She stood there for one more second. Then she nodded once, put on her coat, and walked to her car. He stood in the doorway and watched her go, and the cold came in around him. And somewhere inside the house, his son was asleep and dreaming, and a woman named Janet Reyes was at her desk in the city building a case file, and Renee Caldwell in Asheville was about to make 2 phone calls that would change 3 more lives. And somewhere in Hargrove County, a man named Gerald Marsh was going about his evening with the comfortable certainty who has never been held accountable for anything. That certainty had an expiration date now. Ethan didn't know exactly when it would come. He didn't know how hard the fight would be, or how long, or what it would cost all of them to see it through. He knew the things Marcus had told him, that cases like this were complicated, that institutions protect themselves, that the truth is not always enough and never makes things easy. But he also knew Lily Bennett. He knew Renee Caldwell, who had kept 43 entries in a notebook for 6 years because she refused to pretend she hadn't seen what she'd seen. He knew that somewhere in Hargrove County there were 2 more women who had been waiting, maybe without knowing they were waiting, for someone to ask the question that changes everything. He closed the door. He went to the kitchen table. He opened his laptop. He wrote down everything he needed to remember for tomorrow. The follow-up with Marcus, the document Lily needed to sign, the timeline Janet had laid out. Then he closed the laptop. He turned off the lights. He went to check on Noah. His son was asleep exactly the way he always slept, completely, trustingly, one arm off the bed, the world reduced to the uncomplicated dark. Ethan stood in the doorway for a moment. He thought about what Noah had said in the car. "You're different now." He thought about the fact that an 8-year-old had seen it before he had. He thought about the way Lily had smiled tonight. The real smile. The full one. The one that lived in her eyes and not just on her face. He thought about what it felt like to stand next to someone while they found their own footing, not lifting them, not carrying them, just being the steady thing they could lean against when the ground shifted. He turned off the hallway light. He went to bed. For the first time in longer than he could clearly remember, he fell asleep quickly and completely, without the low-level vigilance that had become so familiar he'd stopped noticing it. Just sleep. Just the uncomplicated dark. Outside, the town moved through its ordinary night. And in an apartment across town, Lily Bennett was sitting at her kitchen table with Renee Caldwell's phone number in her hand and a legal pad in front of her, and 43 documented incidents waiting to see daylight. She was not hiding anymore. Janet Reyes filed the formal EEOC complaint on a Thursday morning, and by Thursday afternoon, Gerald Marsh knew his name was on it. Marcus called Ethan at 4:47 p.m. He didn't say hello. He said, "Crestfield's legal team contacted Janet within 3 hours of filing." 3 hours, Ethan. That's not a company that needs time to think. That's a company that already had a response prepared. Ethan was still on the job site, standing in the partially framed second floor of the Clover Ridge house, sawdust on his jacket, cold air coming through the open-wall stud bays. What does that mean? It means they knew this was coming. Not necessarily this specifically, but something. Companies don't have 3-hour response protocols for complaints they weren't expecting. A pause. It also means they're scared. Scared companies move fast and they make mistakes. What did they say? Their attorney, a man named Kellerman, very expensive, very smooth, called Janet and told her the company was prepared to cooperate fully with any investigation, but wanted to establish from the outset that the incidents described in the complaint were inconsistent with Crestfield's documented workplace history, and that any characterization of a pattern of conduct was, quote, categorically unsupported by the evidence. Ethan was quiet for a second. Categorically unsupported. That's the phrase. They haven't seen Renee's 43 entries yet. No, Marcus said. They haven't. Ethan thought about Gerald Marsh, sitting in his regional vice president office, reading a complaint with his name on it for the first time in 6 years. He thought about what that felt like, the first crack in the certainty. The first moment the comfortable story started to develop a fault line. He hoped it felt exactly as bad as it should. "How's Janet reading the response?" he asked. She said, and I'm quoting directly, "They blinked." Ethan exhaled. "Okay. What's next?" Janet sends the formal documentation package. Monday, Renee's records. The OSHA cross-reference. The timeline analysis. The signed statements from Lily and Renee, and both of the additional women Renee contacted. A pause. All 4 of them, Ethan. All 4 signed. He hadn't known that yet. When did the other 2 sign? This morning. Renee called them both last week. One of them, a woman named Carla. She's the one still in Hargrove County, apparently cried for 20 minutes on the phone, and then said she'd been waiting for someone to call her since the day she left that job. Marcus's voice was careful, controlled, but Ethan knew him well enough to hear what was underneath it. The other one, Sandra. She lives in Delaware now. She didn't cry. She just said yes immediately and asked what she needed to sign. Ethan sat down on a stack of lumber. His crew was working below him, The sounds of the job site, moving at their normal pace, completely ordinary, while everything else kept shifting. 4 women, he said. 4 documented statements. 43 incident entries. 1 OSHA record, and a promotion timeline that Janet says is going to be very hard for Crestfield to explain in a deposition context. Marcus paused. This isn't the case I thought it was 2 weeks ago. What case did you think it was 2 weeks ago? An uphill fight with uncertain odds. Another pause. Now it's something different. What is it now? Marcus took a moment before he answered. Now it's the kind of case that gets settled quietly before it ever sees a courtroom. Because the alternative is that all 4 of those women sit in a deposition and a jury eventually hears 43 entries read aloud in order. He let that sit. Gerald Marsh's attorney knows what that sounds like. Kellerman is expensive because he's smart. He's smart enough to know when the math has changed. Ethan stood back up. Below him, Dale called something about the subfloor on the east end. He raised a hand to signal he'd heard. Tell Janet to move fast, he said. She already is. He called Lily the moment he got to his truck. She answered before the second ring. Marcus called you? Just now. 4 signatures. A breath. I know. Renee called me this morning. Sandra and Carla both said yes. She paused. I don't know how to explain what it feels like to know that other people are standing up and saying the same thing happened to them. It's not good, because it means it kept happening. But it means you weren't crazy, Ethan said. Yes. Very quietly. It means I wasn't crazy. He heard her breathing on the other end of the line. Steady. Controlled. The particular quiet of someone absorbing something real. How are you holding up, he asked. I'm scared, she said. And I keep thinking, what if this is the part where it all falls apart? What if Crestfield has better lawyers and better records, and what if they find some way to discredit Renee's documentation, or make it look like we coordinated our stories, even though we didn't? And what if Lily, I know, I'm catastrophizing again. A little bit. She made a short sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Janet called me this afternoon too. She said their response time tells her they're already on defense. She told Marcus the same thing. She said they blinked. She said that to me too. A pause. Do you trust her? I think she's the most competent person in any room she walks into, Ethan said. And I think she's angry on your behalf, which in my experience is exactly what you want in an attorney. That pulled a real response from Lily, a brief, genuine exhale of relief that she didn't try to cover. Okay, she said, okay. I'm going to try not to spiral for the rest of the week. Come to dinner Saturday, he said. Bring yourself, and whatever you need, to not be alone with your thoughts. Noah's been asking about you. He has? He asked me yesterday if you were coming back to the diner soon, because he wanted to ask you something about the pie. The pie. He has theories about the crust. I didn't follow all of them, but he's very committed. She laughed. The real one. It came through the phone and hit him somewhere in the chest, in the way it always did. That sound that meant she was okay. She was still herself. The weight hadn't taken her down. Saturday, she said. 6 o'clock, I'll be there. He drove home. He made dinner. He helped Noah with a school project involving poster board and way too much glue. He got his son to bed and sat at the kitchen table and felt, for the first time since this started, something that wasn't exactly calm. The stakes were too real for calm, but was adjacent to it. Something like faith. Not the abstract kind. The specific kind that comes from watching people who have been alone in their pain discover that they weren't as alone as they believed. Friday moved fast. Saturday arrived. Lily showed up at 6 with a container of something that turned out to be homemade cookies, which Noah immediately identified as the most important development of the evening, and which effectively ended any chance of adult conversation for the first 30 minutes Barkey, because he needed to know every detail of how they were made, and whether there were other varieties, and could she teach him. Ethan stood in the kitchen doorway and watched his son interrogate a woman about cookie ratios, with the focused intensity he usually reserved for deep-sea creature documentaries, and Lily sat at his kitchen table, answering every question with complete seriousness. And something in Ethan's chest settled into a position it hadn't occupied in a very long time. Later, after dinner, after Noah had been convinced that bedtime was non-negotiable, despite his argument that cookie-related discoveries constituted a legitimate educational exemption, Ethan and Lily sat at the kitchen table with coffee and the easy quiet of people who have stopped needing to fill every silence. "He's extraordinary," Lily said. "He is," Ethan agreed. "He's also exhausting." "That's the same thing at 8. She wrapped both hands around her mug. "You're a good father, Ethan." He looked at her. "How would you know that?" "Because he's kind," she said simply. "Kids that age are unkind, by default, unless someone teaches them otherwise. It doesn't happen on its own." He was quiet for a moment. Claire was the one who was naturally good at the emotional stuff. "I'm still learning." "You're not still learning," Lily said. "You just think you are, because you're comparing yourself to a memory instead of to reality." She said it gently, but directly, the same tone he used with her when she spiraled. He recognized it and appreciated it. "When did you get so good at that?" he said. "At what?" "Saying the thing that cuts straight to it." She looked at her coffee. 6 years of listening to yourself talk in an empty apartment. A pause. "You learn what's true and what's just noise." He held her gaze. She looked back at him, steady, clear-eyed, the woman who had survived a storage room and a broken system, and 6 years of being the careless ex-employee, sitting in his kitchen on a Saturday night, eating homemade cookies and being entirely herself. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it. "Marcus." He looked at Lily. "I should," she said. He picked up. "Marcus, it's late." "I know. I wouldn't call if it wasn't important." Marcus's voice was different, tighter, more controlled. "Kellerman called Janet at 5:30 this afternoon." Ethan stood up. Lily watched him. "And Crestfield wants to talk settlement." The kitchen went very quiet. "They're not admitting anything," Marcus said quickly. Kellerman was very clear about that, very careful about the language. "But they want to open a conversation about resolving the matter without litigation." How did Janet respond? She told him she'd pass it along to her clients and that any settlement conversation would need to begin with a formal acknowledgement of the documented pattern of conduct. A pause. Kellerman said that was a complicated starting point. "It's not complicated at all," Ethan said. "It's the truth. I know that, and you know that. But acknowledging a pattern of conduct creates a legal record that affects every current and future employee claim, every insurance policy, potentially Marsh's status at the company. It's complicated for them." Another pause. Janet said she thinks they'll come back. She thinks the 43 entries scared them more than anything else. "Good. Ethan, I need you to talk to Lily. Tonight, if possible. Because if Crestfield comes back with a number, even a real number, she needs to have already thought about what she actually wants from this. Not what she thinks she should want. What she actually wants." He looked at Lily across the kitchen. She was watching him with that careful reading the room attention she'd developed from years of watching people in a diner. "She's here," he said. A beat of silence. "Then tell her what I just told you." He put the phone on the table between them. Speaker on, and told her. All of it. The settlement conversation. Kellerman's language. Janet's response. The acknowledgement demand. He watched her face while he talked. She didn't interrupt. She didn't react visibly. She just listened with the same complete attention she'd given Marcus at that first meeting, the same focused stillness she used when something mattered. When he finished, Marcus's voice came through the speaker. "Lily, I need to ask you something directly." "Go ahead," she said. "What does the right outcome look like to you? Not the legal outcome. The real one. What do you need to be able to say this was worth it?" She was quiet for a long moment, long enough that Ethan thought she might be building up to something complicated. But when she answered, it was simple. "I need there to be a record," she said. "Somewhere official, somewhere that doesn't disappear, that says what actually happened in that storage room. That I wasn't careless. That he followed me in there. That the shelving unit was not a known hazard. That what he said about me was a lie." She paused. "I don't need him in prison. I don't need a public spectacle. I need the truth to exist in a place where it can't be erased." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "That's going to be a hard line for Crestfield to meet." "I know," Lily said. "But it's the line. I'll tell Janet, Marcus." Her voice was steady. "Tell her I'm not negotiating on that part." A pause. Then, with something that sounded like respect, "I'll tell her exactly that." After Marcus hung up, the kitchen was very quiet for a moment. Then Lily looked at Ethan and said, "Is it too late for more coffee?" He got up and poured it without a word. They sat for another hour. They talked about Carla, who had cried for 20 minutes on the phone with Renee, and then signed her statement, with her hands shaking. They talked about Sandra in Delaware, who had said yes without hesitating. They talked about what it meant that 4 women had all experienced the same thing and had all stayed silent for years, not because they were weak, but because the system around them had been designed to make silence the only survivable option. I think about them a lot, Lily said. The ones I don't know. The ones in Renee's records I've never met. I feel like I know them somehow. Like we were all in the same room at different times and never got to find each other. You found each other now, Ethan said. 6 years later. Still counts. She looked at him. You know what I've been thinking about lately? Tell me. I've been thinking about who I was before Crestfield. Before Marsh. Before the accident and the hospital, and losing the job and all of it. She paused. I was someone who had a plan. I wasn't this. I wasn't just surviving. I was building something. Her voice was careful, not sad exactly, but precise in the way of someone naming a real loss. I want to know if that person is still in here somewhere. She is, Ethan said. You can't know that. I know that she remembered a customer's birthday and brought him free pie without making it a big deal. I know that she handled a diner full of difficult people every day and made every one of them feel seen. I know that when she had every reason to become someone bitter and closed, she stayed someone kind. He held her gaze. The person who had a plan is still in there. She just had a detour she didn't choose. Lily looked at him for a long time. You say things, she said slowly, that I've been trying to say to myself for 6 years and couldn't get right. Maybe it's easier when someone else says it. Maybe. A pause. Or maybe it's easier when someone else believes it first. That landed in the room and stayed there. She left at 10:30. He walked her to the door. She paused on the threshold, the same way she had before, coat in hand, the night cold around her. Ethan, she said. Yeah. Whatever happens with Crestfield, I want you to know that this, she gestured slightly, encompassing the house, the kitchen, the evening, Noah's cookie interrogation, all of it. This already changed something for me. Before any legal outcome, before any settlement or acknowledgement or official record. She looked at him directly. You asked me one question in a diner, and you didn't look away when I answered. That already mattered. I want you to know I know that. He looked at her. I know you know it, he said. I'm glad. She nodded. Put on her coat. Saturday dinners, she said. If that's okay. Standing invitation, he said. She smiled, and walked to her car, and drove away into the ordinary night. He went back inside. He cleaned up the mugs. He turned off the kitchen light. He went to check on Noah, who was deeply asleep with one arm thrown over a library book about deep-sea creatures. He stood in the doorway. He thought about Lily's voice, saying the person who had a plan is still in there. He thought about the way she'd said it, the specific kind of longing that lives in someone who's been estranged from their own ambition for so long that they're not sure if the estrangement is permanent. He thought, it's not permanent. He knew that the way he knew things, he couldn't fully explain the way a builder knows. When a structure is sound without having to calculate every load. Something in the way she moved, the way she thought, the way she held 43 entry injustice in one hand and made cookies for a kid she'd just met with the other. That was not a woman whose best self was behind her. That was a woman who had been waiting for enough solid ground to stand on. He went to bed. He set his alarm. He slept. Wednesday came. Janet sent the full documentation package to Crestfield's legal team at 9 in the morning and called Marcus at 11 to report that Kellerman's office had sent a read receipt within 40 minutes. Marcus texted Ethan. They're reading it now. Clock is ticking. Ethan was in a pre-pour inspection on the Clover Ridge Foundation when the text came in. He read it, put his phone away, and finished the inspection. The concrete was mixed correctly. The rebar placement was right. The forms were solid. You build things one correct step at a time, and eventually, you have something that holds. Thursday passed. Friday passed. Ethan had checked in with Marcus twice and got the same answer both times, waiting. Janet had expected a response by end of week. By Friday afternoon it hadn't come. Saturday morning, Lily texted, "Heard anything?" He replied, "Not yet. Janet says waiting is normal. She replied, "Waiting is the worst." He sent back noted. "Dinner's at 6. Noah found a new cookie variation he wants your feedback on." A pause. "Then he's 8. And he's already experimenting with cookie variations. He watches a lot of cooking content. That's either wonderful or alarming. Probably both." 6 o'clock. She came at 6. Noah presented what he described as a modified chocolate chip cookie with, in his words, a strategic reduction in sugar and an increase in vanilla, and awaited her verdict with the gravity of a chef presenting to a critic. Lily tasted it with complete seriousness, considered for a moment, and told him the vanilla ratio was inspired, but the chocolate chips needed to be distributed more toward the edges to improve the corner-to-center flavor consistency. Noah wrote this down. Ethan stood in the kitchen doorway and felt something so close to happiness that he had to look away for a second because it was almost too much to hold at the same time as everything else. Marcus called at 7:43 p.m. Ethan stepped out of the kitchen. Lily watched him go with that quiet reading the room attention. Noah was still writing in his cookie notebook. "They came back," Marcus said. Ethan's hand tightened on the phone. "What did they say?" "Kellerman called Janet this afternoon. Crestfield is willing to enter formal settlement discussions. They're still not using the word acknowledgement, but a pause. They agreed to Janet's precondition." Ethan stopped walking. "They agreed to the acknowledgement. They agreed to discuss it. Which, from Kellerman, is as close to yes as you're going to get in an initial call." Marcus's voice had that focused quality again. The building something quality. Janet thinks they read Renee's documentation and realized that 43 entries read aloud in a deposition is not a situation their client recovers from, especially with 4 separate plaintiffs. Ethan leaned against the hallway wall. He closed his eyes for a second. "When do discussions start?" he asked. "Janet wants to schedule a formal mediations session within the next 2 weeks. She wants all 4 women to have the option to participate, either in person or by video. She's going to call Lily tomorrow." A pause. "But Ethan, I wanted to call you first. Because I want you to understand something. Tell me." "This is the moment," Marcus said. "Everything up to now has been building toward this. The next 2 weeks, whatever happens in that mediation room, that's when it becomes real. For all 4 of them, but especially for Lily." He paused. "She's going to need you to be steady." "I know. I mean very steady. Crestfield's attorneys will try to make the process itself feel impossible. They'll use delay and technical language, and they'll make offers that are structured to feel generous but contain language that's designed to limit any future claims. Janet will be there to fight every word, but the emotional weight of sitting in a room where the other side has $5,000 suits and a team of people trying to turn your experience into a liability number." Another pause. "That's a lot." "I know," Ethan said again. "She trusts you," Marcus said. "More than she trusts the process. More than she trusts any of this. She trusts you. So when she looks at you in that room, or before it, or after it, make sure you're giving her something real to hold on to." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "I will. I know you will." Marcus's voice softened slightly. "Claire would have liked her, you know. She had a thing about people with that particular kind of quiet strength." Ethan's throat tightened. He didn't answer right away. "Yeah," he said finally. "I know she would." He went back to the kitchen. Lily looked at him the moment he came through the door, reading his face the way she read every room. That particular attention she had developed, and probably thought, was invisible. "Marcus?" she said. Crestfield agreed to Janet's precondition. He sat down across from her. "They want to settle." She went completely still. Noah looked up from his notebook. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's okay. Bud," Ethan said, "go ahead and finish your notes." Noah looked at Lily, then at his father, then back at his notes, with the particular sensitivity of a child who understands more than adults expect and has learned to give people space to feel things. Lily was looking at the table. Her hands were flat against it, palms down, the posture Ethan had come to recognize as her way of grounding herself when something big was moving through her. "They want to settle," she said quietly. "Janet calls you tomorrow. She'll explain what comes next." But they looked up. They agreed to the acknowledgement precondition. That's what Marcus said. She looked at him for a long moment. He could see her processing it, not just the fact of it. But the weight of it, what it meant that a company with $5,000 lawyers had read 43 entries and decided that fighting was worse than admitting the truth, had been buried. 6 years, she said. 6 years, he said. And it took. She stopped, looked at her hands. It took someone asking a question I'd stopped expecting anyone to ask. It took you answering it, he said. It took Renee keeping records for 2 years. It took Sandra and Carla saying yes. It took all of it. She nodded slowly, absorbed that. Let it settle. I'm not done being scared, she said. I know. The mediation's still ahead. But something. She looked at him. Something shifted just now. Something I'd been bracing against for so long I forgot it was possible to stop bracing. She paused. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. Noah, without looking up from his notebook, said, when something really hard is almost over, your body still thinks it has to be ready for the hard part. It takes a while to catch up. Both adults looked at him. He glanced up. My teacher said that about tests. But I think it works for other stuff too. Lily looked at this 8-year-old child with his cookie notebook and his cooking channel theories and his quiet, uncomplicating kindness. And her exchange did something that Ethan had no clean word for. Not quite joy, and not quite grief, and not quite relief, but the specific and irreplaceable feeling of being in exactly the right place, at exactly the right time, and knowing it. Your teacher is very smart, Lily told him. I know, Noah said. I told her that. Lily laughed. Full and real and present. And something in the room changed, not dramatically. Not with a speech, or a declaration, or a moment that would have a name later. Just the ordinary, uncomplicated warmth of 3 people at a kitchen table on a Saturday night. The worst of it still ahead, but the first real light coming through. The structure holding, the foundation sound. Ethan refilled the coffee. Noah asked if there was a third cookie variation they could attempt before bedtime, which there was not. Lily stayed until 9:15 and drove home through the same ordinary night the town had always been. Except that somewhere in Hargrove County a man named Gerald Marsh was going to get a call from his attorney this week. And the call was going to tell him that the story he'd been standing on for 6 years had developed a crack so wide and so documented that the only question left was how much it was going to cost him when it finally gave way. The truth had been buried. But buried things have a way of coming up. Lily Bennett had never stopped knowing what the truth was. Now, for the first time in 6 years, the truth was about to be put somewhere. It couldn't be erased. The mediation was scheduled for a Tuesday, 9 in the morning, at a neutral location in the city, a conference facility that existed specifically for the purpose of putting opposing sides in adjacent rooms and walking carefully between them until something broke one way or the other. Janet had explained the process to all 4 women on a group called Previous Thursday. Renee would attend in person, driving up from Asheville the night before. Sandra had flown in from Delaware. Carla had driven 40 minutes from Hargrove County and arrived looking like someone who had not slept in 3 days and was running entirely on the specific fuel of finally being taken seriously. Lily had not slept either. Ethan knew this because she'd texted him at 2:17 in the morning. Just 3 words. I'm still awake. He'd texted back, me too. Which was almost true. He'd been in that shallow half sleep that doesn't really count. The kind where you're aware of the ceiling above you, and the silence of the house, and the weight of tomorrow. He picked her up at 7:30. She was ready when he pulled up, standing outside her building in her good coat, the dark gray one she saved for things that mattered, with her hair pulled back and her hands still and her face carrying the particular expression of someone who has decided that whatever comes next, they are going to meet it standing upright. She got in the truck without saying anything. He pulled out into the early morning. After a few minutes she said, I keep thinking about what I'm going to feel when I'm in the same room as the people who work for him. Kellerman's team, yes. A pause. I know they're just doing their job. I know it's not personal for them. But I keep thinking about the fact that they spent the last 2 weeks reading everything, Renee's 43 entries, my statement, Carla and Sandra, and their job is to read all of that, and then walk into a room and argue about numbers. Her voice was even. I don't know how to feel about that. You feel however you feel, Ethan said. You don't have to manage it. That's what Janet's for. She was quiet for a moment. Janet said something to me on Thursday that I keep coming back to. What? She said. Your job today is not to win. Your job is to tell the truth one more time and let the truth do the work. Lily looked out the window. She said, the truth has already been doing the work for 2 weeks. The documentation, the OSHA record, the timeline. The truth walked into that building before you did, and it's been sitting in their conference room, making them uncomfortable. And your job is just to show up and confirm that you know what it is. Ethan nodded. She's right. I know she's right. A pause. It's just harder to believe it at 7:30 in the morning than it is at 10 o'clock at night. That's why I'm driving, he said. That pulled the smallest breath of a laugh from her. She turned and looked at him, really looked, in the direct and unguarded way she'd developed over the past weeks, the way that said she'd stopped calculating how much of herself it was safe to show him. Thank you for being here, she said. Always, he said. And meant it the way you only mean things you've thought about, enough to be certain of. They arrived at 8:50. Janet was already in the lobby with her leather briefcase and the expression of someone who has been in rooms like this many times and has never once walked out feeling like she'd wasted her morning. She shook Lily's hand, then Ethan, and said, Renee, Sandra and Carla are in the side room. Go see them first. You need to start this together. Lily nodded and went. Ethan started to follow. Janet stopped him with a hand on his arm. She's going to be okay, Janet said, low enough that it was just for him. I know, he said. I want you to know, I've been doing this for 22 years. She looked at him steadily. The case Renee built 43 entries. Dated, specific, cross-referenced with personnel records. She retained copies of I have seen cases with a fraction of this documentation, go to trial, and win. Crestfield's attorneys know that. Kellerman knows that. A pause. What they're going to try to do today is make the number feel like a victory, so the acknowledgement language gets buried in the settlement terms. My job is to make sure that doesn't happen. The acknowledgement is non-negotiable, Ethan said. Lily was clear about that. I know she was. Janet held his gaze. I was clear about it too. That's why they agreed to be in the room today, instead of filing a motion to dismiss. She let that sit. When they agreed to this mediation, with those preconditions, they were telling us the acknowledgement was survivable for them. The question now is what form it takes and how specifically it's worded. She paused. That's where we'll spend today. Ethan nodded. What do you need from me? Nothing professional. Just be the reason she remembers she can hold the line when it gets hard in there. She picked up her briefcase. That's more valuable than anything I can do. She walked toward the mediation rooms. Ethan stood in the lobby for a moment, alone, and thought about the distance between a rainy Thursday night in a diner booth and a mediation facility in the city, with 4 women and an attorney, and 43 documented incidents. He thought about the unanswered forum post. Does anyone know if there's a way to report a supervisor without it coming back to you? Someone was answering it now. He went to find the side room. When he pushed open the door, he stopped. The 4 of them were standing together, Lily, Renee, Sandra, Carla, and they were not doing anything dramatic. They weren't crying or making speeches. Renee had her hand on Lily's arm. Sandra was saying something quiet that he couldn't hear. Carla was nodding, her jaw tight, her eyes bright with the specific brightness of someone who is not going to cry in this room and has decided that firmly. They looked like women who had never met each other but had been carrying the same weight in different rooms for years and had finally, today, set it down in the same place at the same time. Ethan did not go in. He stood in the doorway for just a moment, then pulled the door quietly closed and went to sit in the lobby and wait. The mediation ran for 6 hours and 14 minutes. He knew this because he watched the clock above the lobby reception desk mark every minute of it. He drank 3 cups of terrible lobby coffee. He texted Marcus twice with updates that amounted to nothing yet. Still waiting, which Marcus acknowledged each time with a single word. Steady. At the 2-hour mark, Janet came out briefly. Her expression told him nothing useful, which he'd learned meant things were difficult but not broken. She refilled her water, said we're working, and went back in. At the 4-hour mark, he heard voices from the corridor, not angry, but pressured, the sound of people negotiating in the specific key of people who both need something the other one has. He couldn't make out words. He didn't try. At 5 hours and 40 minutes, his phone buzzed. Marcus. He picked up. I just got off with Janet's paralegal, Marcus said. They're close. Ethan sat forward. How close? She said they've been on the acknowledgement language for 2 hours. Kellerman keeps trying to soften it, words like regrets the circumstances and acknowledges concerns were raised instead of what Janet's demanding. A pause. Janet's demanding language that specifically states the documented incidents occurred, that the company's response was inadequate, and that the characterization of Lily's accident as employee carelessness was inaccurate and unsupported by the maintenance record. Ethan went still. The maintenance record. Janet got it, Marcus said quietly. Crestfield's own maintenance log. Subpoena power in the mediation process. The shelving unit in the third-floor supply area had 0 prior maintenance flags. 0. Gerald Marsh's claim that it was a known hazard was a documented lie in Crestfield's own internal records. Ethan pressed the phone against his ear. He was gripping it hard enough that his hand hurt slightly, and he didn't adjust his grip. So his whole story was a lie that Crestfield's own records disprove. Marcus's voice was very controlled. Janet put the maintenance log on the table in front of Kellerman 2 hours ago. He went out to call the company. He came back 30 minutes later, ready to talk about acknowledgement language. Good, Ethan said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. It's very good, Marcus said. It means the settlement agreement, if they reach one, will contain language based on what actually happened. Not what was convenient. Not what protected the company. What actually happened. A pause. Lily gets her record. Ethan, the real one. Ethan stood up. He walked to the window. The city moved outside, ordinary, indifferent, completely unaware that 6 hours ago, 4 women walked into a building carrying 6 years of a buried truth and were now, minute by minute, setting it down somewhere it couldn't be buried again. How much longer? He asked. Janet thinks they'll be done within the hour. He hung up. He went back to his chair. He waited. 53 minutes later, the door to the mediation corridor opened. Lily came out first. He stood up the moment he saw her face. Not because something was wrong, nothing in her expression said wrong. It was something else. It was the specific look of someone who has just put down something extraordinarily heavy and is still adjusting to the physical sensation of their own hands being empty. She walked across the lobby to him. She stopped. She looked at him. It's done, she said. He didn't ask for details yet. Are you okay? She thought about that for a moment, really considered it. The way she considered everything, with that full attention that meant she was going to tell him the truth. I'm more okay than I have been in 6 years, she said. Behind her, Renee came through the door. Then Carla. Then Sandra. Janet came last, briefcase in hand. And she looked like someone who had just spent 6 hours doing exactly the work she was put on earth to do, and had done it well. Janet caught Ethan's eye. She nodded once, small and certain. He exhaled. The acknowledgement language was in the settlement. Janet walked them through it in the side room. All 4 women around a table. Ethan standing near the door. The wording was formal and careful, and had cost 6 hours of argument, but it was there, specific, documented, on record. The company acknowledged that a documented pattern of conduct had occurred. The company acknowledged that the response to reported incidents had been inadequate. The company acknowledged that the characterization of Lily Bennett's 2019 injury as resulting from employee carelessness was inaccurate and inconsistent with the company-owned company's maintenance records. Lily's name was in it. The truth was in it. Both of those things were now part of an official legal document that could not be erased. Carla pressed both hands flat on the table when Janet finished reading. She said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "They put it in writing." "They put it in writing," Janet confirmed. Carla nodded. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes were very bright. She was not going to cry, and she was not crying, and she was also clearly experiencing something so terrible that the whole front of her face was working to contain it. Sandra, who had not said much all day, said quietly, "Is it over?" "Your legal obligation in this matter is complete," Janet said. "What happens next with your individual healing, your individual lives, that's yours. But yes, this part is over." Sandra looked at the table. She pressed her lips together. She exhaled a long breath that sounded like it had been held since Delaware. Renee looked at Lily. Lily looked at Renee. 6 years. Different paths. Same weight. Finally sat down in the same place. "Thank you," Lily said to Renee. And the two words carried everything, all 43 entries. All the nights Renee had typed in that notebook, instead of pretending she hadn't seen what she'd seen. All the years of distance that hadn't erased what she knew. Renee reached across the table and took Lily's hand. "You would have done it for me," she said. "Yes," Lily said. "I would have." They sat like that for a moment. Nobody rushed it. Then Janet said, practically and kindly, "You should all eat something. It's 3 in the afternoon, and none of you have eaten since this morning." That broke the weight just enough. Carla laughed short, surprised. The laugh of someone who hadn't expected to laugh. Today. Sandra smiled. Renee squeezed Lily's hand and let go. Ethan drove Lily home through the late afternoon. She was quiet for most of the drive, not the braced for impact quiet of the morning. But something looser. She sat differently. Like someone whose posture had been slightly wrong for a long time, and had just been corrected. "About 10 minutes from her apartment," she said. "They had the maintenance log the whole time." "I know." Their own records. Proving their own story was a lie. They had it filed away in some corporate archive for 6 years and nobody ever pulled it. She paused. Because nobody ever pushed hard enough to make them. He didn't say anything. She wasn't asking a question. She was saying the thing out loud, because sometimes the truth needs to be spoken into the air before it fully becomes real. "Gerald Marsh," she said. "What happens to him?" Janet said the settlement doesn't include criminal referral. Ethan said carefully. "The civil process has its own lane. But the EEOC record, the settlement acknowledgement, the documented pattern, if he ever has another employee complaint filed against him, all of this is discoverable. It follows him." A pause. "He doesn't walk away clean. He walks away with a shadow that doesn't go away." She absorbed that. "It's not prison, no. It's not enough," she said. "Not for what he did. Not for 6 years, no," Ethan said. "It's not enough. It never is." He glanced at her. "But it's real. And it's documented. And it's more than you had yesterday." She nodded slowly. "More than I had yesterday." She said it like she was trying on the shape of it. "That's true." He pulled up to her building. She didn't get out right away. She sat with her hands in her lap and looked out through the windshield at the ordinary street. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Okay." "When I walked into that mediation room this morning, I had this thought. This very clear, very specific thought." She paused. "I thought, if this doesn't work, if the acknowledgement language doesn't happen, if they find a way to make this settlement into something that buries the truth instead of revealing it, I will still be okay. Because the truth exists, whether anyone documents it or not. And I know what happened. And Renee knows. And Carla and Sandra know. And you know." She turned and looked at him. "I've been carrying this alone for 6 years because I thought the truth only counted if someone official wrote it down. And I walked into that room today knowing that wasn't true anymore. The truth was already real. Today just made it visible." He looked at her for a long moment. "When did you figure that out?" he asked. "Somewhere between 2 in the morning and 7:30, she said. "Probably around 3. He smiled. She smiled back, the real one. The full one. The one that had been living behind 6 years of careful maintenance and finally had enough room to exist without apology. "Come in for dinner," she said. "I'll cook." He raised an eyebrow. "You cook?" "I work in a diner. I know how food works. That's not the same thing. Come in and find out." He parked the truck. He called Mrs. Garfield, who said Noah had been a perfect gentleman all afternoon and was currently teaching her cat a trick, which Ethan doubted but appreciated. He told her he'd be back by 8. She said, "Take your time." He went inside. Lily cooked pasta. She was good at it, efficient and unfussy, the way people are good at things they've done. So many times, it's become part of how they think. She talked while she cooked, which was new, or not new exactly, but a different version of her talking, lighter, easier, the conversational gear shift of someone who has put down a specific weight and discovered that without it, they have more range of motion. She talked about Carla, who had quietly mentioned on the way out that she'd been thinking about going back to school, and had never quite let herself, because the Crestfield thing had made her feel like ambition was something bad things happened to. She talked about Sandra, who had Sandra-level practicality, said she was using her portion of the settlement for a down payment on a house she'd been looking at for 2 years. She talked about Renee, who had hugged her in the lobby for a long time before getting in her car to drive back to Asheville, and who had said, "I'm going to expand the garden this spring. I've been thinking too small." "She's going to be okay," Lily said, setting a bowl in front of him. "You're all going to be okay," Ethan said. She sat down across from him. She looked at the food. She looked at him. She said suddenly, "I want to go back to school." He looked at her. "Okay. I stopped thinking about it so long ago I forgot I'd wanted it. But I had a plan before Crestfield. I was working toward an operations degree. Part-time. I had it mapped out." She picked up her fork. "I think I want to finish it." "Then finish it," he said. "It'll take a few years while I'm still working." "Okay, I might need to adjust my schedule at the diner." "Lily." He looked at her steadily. "I'm not presenting obstacles. I'm saying okay. Finish the degree. Make the plan. Do the thing." She looked at him. The expression on her face was complicated, in the best possible way, the look of someone who has spent so long asking permission from a world that kept saying no, that hearing an uncomplicated yes feels almost too simple to be real. "Why are you so—" She stopped. "Why is this so easy for you?" "Because it's the right thing," he said. "And because you've been talking yourself out of what you deserve for so long that any other response would just be adding home to the problem." She was quiet for a moment. "Claire was lucky," she said softly, "having you." The name landed in the room gently, the way it did now, not like an intrusion, not like a wound, but like something that belonged in the conversation, because it was true, and because Lily was someone who said true things. "I was lucky too," he said. "Different kind of lucky now." She held his gaze. Neither of them looked away. After dinner, after the dishes, they sat at her kitchen table and coffee, and Ethan noticed for the first time that her apartment felt different than it had the few times he'd been there before. Not the physical space, but the atmosphere. The low-grade tension that had lived here. The particular quality of a space where someone had been surviving rather than living was gone, or starting to go. The way a room feels different when a window that's been painted shut finally opens. "Can I tell you what I see?" he said. She looked at him. "Okay. I see someone who spent 6 years being defined by a story someone else wrote about her. And I see that story being rewritten right now in real time. Not by a lawyer, not by a settlement document, not by me." He held her gaze. "By you. By the choices you're making right now about who you're going to be next." She was very still. "I see someone who's about to find out," he said, "how much she's actually capable of, when she's not spending all her energy on surviving." She looked at him for a long time. Her eyes were bright. She was not going to cry, and she was not crying, and she was also clearly holding something very large, very carefully. "You know," she said finally, "for a guy who says he's not good at the emotional stuff, you're extraordinarily good at the emotional stuff." "Don't tell anyone," he said. "I have a reputation," she laughed. "The full one. The real one. The one that had been the truest thing about her from the very first night in booth 4, the one that meant she was still herself, still present, still the person who remembered customer birthdays and brought free pie and stayed kind through everything the world had thrown at her." That laugh, Ethan thought, was the most resilient thing he'd ever heard. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it. "Noah, Dad, is Mrs. Garfield's cat supposed to be in the kitchen cabinet?" "She says yes, but I have questions." Lily leaned over and read it. She laughed again, different pitch, pure delight. "You should go," she said. "I should go," he agreed. He stood. She stood. They were close to each other, in the way people are close when neither of them has moved away. "Saturday," he said. "Saturday," she said. "I'm thinking I'll teach Noah the next stage of cookie variations. He's going to be unbearable after this. You know, in the best way." "Good," she said. "He should be." He put on his jacket. She walked him to the door. He paused on the threshold, the night cold around him, and turned back. "Lily." "Yeah. 6 weeks ago, you were hiding Scar in a diner booth and convincing yourself that the truth only counted if you could bear it alone." He looked at her. "Look where you are tonight." She looked back at him. Something moved through her face, slow, warm, real. The particular expression of someone who has finally arrived somewhere after a very long walk and is just now beginning to believe they're actually there. "I know," she said. "You did that," he said. "Not me. Not Marcus, not Janet, you." She held his gaze for one more moment. Then she nodded small, certain. The nod of someone who is choosing to believe something true about themselves. Maybe for the first time in 6 years. "Good night, Ethan," she said. "Good night, Lily." He drove home through the ordinary night. Noah was in the kitchen, deeply invested in explaining the cabinet situation to Mrs. Garfield, who appeared completely unbothered. Ethan thanked her, got Noah through the bath and teeth routine, with the usual negotiations about reading time, and finally sat on the edge of his son's bed while Noah, already heavy-eyed, asked the question he apparently needed to ask before sleep. "Is Lily okay now?" Ethan thought about how to answer that. He thought about the honest version, the full version, the version that was also simple enough to be true. "Yeah," he said, "she's okay. She's more than okay, actually. She had a really hard thing happen to her a long time ago, and today some of that hard thing got put right." Noah processed this with the focused calm of a child receiving important information. "Did you help?" "A little bit," Ethan said. "She did most of it herself." Noah nodded like this confirmed something he'd already suspected. "Good. She should get the credit." Ethan looked at his son, 8 years old, already understanding things that take most people decades. "Yeah," he said. "She should." He turned off the light. He closed the door most of the way. He stood in the hallway for a moment in the quiet house and thought about everything that had happened since a tray hit the floor on a rainy Thursday night, and everything that was going to happen next. Lily Bennett was going to finish her degree. She was going to find out what she was capable of when she wasn't spending all her energy on surviving. She was going to stop apologizing for taking up space and start using the space she had. And Ethan Carter, who had spent 4 years building a careful, narrowed life around the edges of his grief, had discovered slowly, in booth 4, over bad coffee and honest conversation, that making room for someone else didn't mean losing ground. It meant the house got bigger. He went to bed. He set his alarm. He slept well. Months passed. They passed the way good time passes, not slowly, not fast, but with the particular fullness that comes when days are actually lived rather than simply survived. Lily registered for her first class in 6 years on a Tuesday morning and texted Ethan a photo of the enrollment confirmation with no words, just the photo, and he texted back, "There she is." Noah had his own opinion about the first assignment she brought to his kitchen table, a business communications essay, that he declared needed more personality in the first sentence, which made Lily rearrange her opening paragraph entirely and get a better grade, which Noah took appropriate credit for. Renee expanded her garden. Sandra bought her house. Carla enrolled in night classes. 4 women who had been silenced by the same man in the same building found, in the months after, that the silence lifting had cleared space for things they'd stopped believing were possible. Gerald Marsh resigned from Crestfield 11 weeks after the settlement. The company issued a press release about his decision to pursue other opportunities, which was corporate language for what everyone in that building knew the real language was. The maintenance logs and the settlement acknowledgement were in the company's legal record. His shadow was not going away. It was not enough. It was never going to be enough for what he'd taken from 4 people and however many others before them. Ethan knew that. Lily knew it better than he did. But justice doesn't always come in the form of enough. Sometimes it comes in the form of more than yesterday, and more than yesterday has to be where you build from. Lily stopped hiding the scar. Not dramatically, not with a speech. Just gradually, organically, the way people stop hiding things when they stop being ashamed of them. One warm Saturday, she wore a sleeveless blouse to the dinner for the first time in years, and a customer asked about her shoulder, and she said, simply, "Old injury. I'm fine now," and moved on, and that was all. No apology. No performance of survival. Just a woman who had something that had happened to her and had decided it was not the most interesting thing about her. Booth 4 stayed Ethan's booth. The regulars knew it. Becca knew it. Dorothy Hess, who had opinions about everything, told Sheila that whatever was happening between that construction man and Lily was, in her assessment, Exactly the right kind of thing. On a Friday evening in late April, Ethan was in booth 4 when Lily came over with his coffee black. No menu, he'd stopped needing 1 month ago, and sat down across from him the way she did sometimes, when the dinner rush hadn't hit yet and the diner was in its quiet between times. I got my first midterm grade back, she said. 94. He looked at her. Don't make it a big thing, she said. I'm not making it a thing. You're doing the face. I don't have a face. You have a face, she said. It's the face you make when Noah does something that surprises you and you're trying not to make self-conscious about it. She looked at him steadily. Stop doing the face. He stopped doing the face. Mostly. I'm proud of you. I know, she said. That's why I told you. They looked at each other across the table. Outside, the evening was coming in. The diner would fill up soon. She'd go back to work, and he'd drink his coffee, and the ordinary machinery of the place would resume its rhythm. But right now, in the few quiet minutes before the door opened again, they sat across from each other in booth 4, where it had all started with a drop tray and a scar and one question that nobody had ever thought to ask. Who did this to you? That question had a real answer now. The answer was in a settlement document. It was in a maintenance log. It was in 43 entries that a woman in Asheville had kept in a notebook because she refused to pretend she hadn't seen what she'd seen. It was in the EEOC record. It was in the truth, which had always been true and was now, finally, official. And the person it had happened to was sitting in a diner booth with a 94 on her midterm and an operations degree in progress and a plan for the first time in 6 years, and the clear, unguarded gaze of someone who has stopped apologizing for existing. Ethan looked at her. She looked back at him. Thank you, she said, quietly, simply, the same 2 words she'd said in the beginning, before any of this had resolved into what it was now, but carrying something different now, something that had weight and history and all the specific gravity of the months between. You already thanked me, he said. I know, she said. I'm thanking you again. He held her gaze. You're welcome, he said. Again the door opened. A family of 4 came in. Lily stood, smoothed her uniform, picked up her order pad, and before she moved toward them, she paused for just a second and looked back at him. She was smiling. The real one. The full one. The one that lived in her eyes and stayed. It was the smile of a woman who had been through the worst of it and come out the other side, not diminished but clarified, stripped of everything false, left with only what was real and what was hers. That smile had always been there. Behind the scar, behind the silence, behind 6 years of making herself smaller than she was. It had been there the whole time, waiting. Someone had finally asked the right question. And Lily Bennett had finally answered it, not just to an attorney, not just to a mediator, not just to an official record, but to herself. She was worth defending. She always had been. She knew that now. And knowing it, truly knowing it in the bones and the body, rather than just managing to believe it on good days. That was the thing no settlement document had given her, and no court could have ordered. That was the thing she had built herself, one honest conversation at a time. In booth 4, with bad coffee and a man who had asked one question, and then stayed for the answer. The scar on her back was still there. It always would be. But it no longer told the story of what had been done to her. It told the story of what she had survived and rebuilt, and refused to let define her. A scar may tell the story of what happened to you. Your courage tells the story of who you became. And Lily Bennett, at 30 years old, with a 94 on her midterm and a plan and a life that was finally, genuinely hers, had become some extraordinary. She had always been. She just finally knew it.